McMahon.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise today to update the House on the campaign against the Liberal Party's outrageous plans to dump radioactive waste in my electorate and the electorate of Lindsay. By way of background for the House, we've spoken about this in the House before, but there is radioactive waste at Hunters Hill in Sydney's North Shore as a result of an old factory which used radium to make medical supplies in the early part of this century. Now, this is a very serious matter which has been going on for a long time. Before the last state election in New South Wales, the Liberal Party promised they would not dump radioactive waste in Western Sydney. And yet, now after the election, we see a complete change of heart from the New South Wales Liberal government. The proposal to dump 5,000 tonnes of radioactive waste at the Kemps Creek facility and also to dump radioactive waste at Lidcombe in the federal electorate of Reid is something that the Liberal Party is intent on proceeding with. Now, my colleagues, the member for Lindsay, the member for Fowler and I met with Premier O'Farrell several weeks ago, and we put to him the concerns of our community. And he was good enough to accept the meeting, and we had a discussion about it, and I do acknowledge that. He said to us that this is a very serious issue and that people may well have died as a result of this waste and needed to deal with it. Well, as we said to the Premier, that's the very point. It is a very serious issue, and for him to say that people have died and therefore this waste must be taken out of Sydney's North Shore and dumped in Western Sydney is completely unacceptable. Now, the minister responsible for this decision is Minister Pearce. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Minister Pearce lately, and I'm not going to go there. There's been calls for his dismissal, and I'm not going to go there. But I'll tell you what he should be sacked for, is his outrageous arrogance when it comes to the people of Western Sydney. This is what he said about the people of Kemps Creek, in my electorate. It is 5 kilometres from the nearest housing, and the area around it is not zoned for housing. This is a purpose-built facility away from everybody. Well, I don't think he's ever been there, Madam Deputy Speaker. There's a house on the gate with people living there next to this facility. There are 2,309 people living in Kemps Creek. These are people. Mr Pearce seems to think they do not exist. Then there's the people of the surrounding suburbs and communities, Abbotsbury, St Clair, Erskine Park, Colleton, all concerned about this outrageous plan to dump North Shore's radioactive waste in Western Sydney. Now, we had a rally last week. The member for Lindsay convened the rally. He paid for it in the absence of Penrith Council's leadership and their refusal to pay for the rally against this. And there was a good crowd there, and we talked about the substance of the issue. We talked about the proposal of the federal Labor members for a feasibility study to encapsulate this waste where it is. We're not sticking our heads in the sand. We're not suggesting that nothing should be done, but there is a realistic, feasible way of dealing with this, which is to encapsulate the waste, to ensure that it is appropriately stored without using Western Sydney as a dumping ground. Now, I must say, some people have said, well, why are the federal Labor MPs interested in this? This is a state matter. Well, it's because our Liberal state MPs are missing in action, refusing to stand up for their community. Tanya Davies, Andy Rohan, completely absent from this discussion. Ms Davies was very vocal about this before the election. She was out there at the site saying this wouldn't happen. Mr Rohan was on Fairfield Council. He was against this. And now all of a sudden, because the New South Wales Liberal government has this as policy, they are struck dumb and refusing to stand up for their communities. They've sided with their party over their community. So the federal Labor MPs are prepared to stand up for the community, and we would say the same. If anybody proposes this, if the State Labor Party in the future proposes this, or the Liberal Party, we would be opposed to this just as we have opposed it in the past, and will continue to oppose it. Now, the Liberal Party says this is just soil, and even as recently as last week they were saying it's just soil. If it's just soil, leave it where it is. If it's just soil, why does it have to be monitored for 300 years? 300 years, Deputy Speaker, to ensure that it remains an acceptable risk. Well, it is not an acceptable risk. 300 years is not an acceptable time for it to be monitored. The New South Wales government should drop this plan today. I fear they are kicking it off until after the federal election to make a decision to run interference for their mates in the federal Liberal Party. Well, we will keep this campaign going. There will be more rallies. There will be more protests, and we will not rest until this plan is dead.
The question is that the motion be agreed.